the Imp and the Ogre. My name's Paul.
This is Ryan.
Today we are talking about the Ghost of Mistmoor.
The Ghost of Mistmoor. This was a second edition D&D adventure. Originally published in Dungeon Magazine 35. Written by Leonard Wilson. It's designed for 3 to 5 players of levels 3 to 6 in that range-ish. The brief synopsis of it is that PCs get recruited to help an impoverished noble even, reclaim his inheritance from a haunted manor. Shenanigans ensue.
I actually quite enjoyed this adventure overall. I thought it was fun. I thought it was great.
I thought it was really good.
Yeah, well written. Like the motive is nice in it. You're punished for being bad people in the end if you choose to go that route. You're like out to help a guy who just inherited debt effectively and just wants to be like a normal guy.
It was just really nicely structured, logical progression, good reasons for things to occur, good hooks for future adventures. In the end,
the NPCs in the adventure I thought were well written. They had like their own motives that made sense. They did things that made sense towards their motive. The idea wasn't to hurt people in this adventure. It seemed like it was like, we're really here to help this guy. The other NPCs are kind of out to help themselves. They also don't want to hurt other people, which I enjoyed about Psyche and Brock, the 2 other protagonists in the adventure. Antagonists, out of protagonists, whatever.
Proto-antagonists.
So my general impression is like would run.
Oh, yeah. Definitely in the would run pile for sure. I also really like that it's effectively a day.
It is, yeah.
Right? Like, in terms of game time, this whole adventure takes place over 24 hours, maybe 48. Like, there's one situation where I could, like, the final vault. Like, I think once you find where that is, if you're super hurting, I could see people going back to town to recuperate and then
tackling the vault.
Tackle it. So, like, there's only one place where I could legitimately see there being that time of downtime. And the reason why I say, as we'll talk about, going back to town is you effectively can't rest in the manor, as we'll see, which is also something I liked because it should bring into fatigue and exhaustion type saving throws and rolls and whatnot, because it's going to be people having to work without sleep. Past that standard 8-hour adventuring day, so penalties may accrue, which is again is something that doesn't always get used. So it's a nice little mechanic. Though the PCs again can just leave whenever they want, like they don't have to stay beyond that night.
Yeah,
right?
They can go whenever they want. So I guess to understand the adventure a little bit, you need to understand sort of like what happened to the Mistmoor family, and that the Mistmoors used to be very proud and rich, and then they were infiltrated by a bad person who convinced one of the 3 triplets to go insane. She murdered her family, and since then
murdered everybody.
Yeah, since then the Mistmoor name fell into the ditch, and then there's just been like this general rumor of the Mistmoor treasury that's been sought after for a very long time.
Yeah, their manor was thought to be haunted, so they relocated to town, and they didn't have access to their monies and all of that type of stuff. So that information is not secret. Like I think pretty much anybody in town could pass that on.
Yeah,
and
if you just asked.
Your patron will be able to fill in all of the, not necessarily the specific details, but the broad strokes of it for sure. So that kind of ties into, actually, before we get into that, one point I want to make just as sort of a general impression. While I really did like this adventure, it's not, again, it's not a very high action adventure. Mm-hmm. There are, I think, enough combat encounters that your stabbier players won't necessarily get bored. Right, there's enough things to stumble onto, but you definitely need to have some more social players. And I don't even think there's no big roles that you need to make. So it's not like you need somebody who is designed to be a face character. You just need players that are willing to converse.
I agree, because there's actions that happen. There's a lot of things that happen when you're in the house, and things. So I think even if you were a very fight oriented player, you might be okay with this adventure because there's lots of things happening in the doors anyway.
Yeah, so it is still very reactionary. So you don't even need your players to be particularly proactive about searching out stuff, but it can't just be punch, right? Like players that only respond to unusual happenings with violence are going to not get as much out of this. I'm not saying you can't do it, right? If you just have a bunch of murder hobos, they can do this adventure.
You get rewarded in the end with quite an epic fight, regardless if you are combat oriented and
dangerous encounters just in general. You can't. You'd probably have a harder time doing this adventure if you couldn't do any fight. If you're just a party of low-level bards, you're going to have a bad time. But it's just you'll get the most out of it if players are willing to engage with the environment, the NPCs that they encounter, because there's a lot of things that can be resolved with conversation.
Absolutely.
Not even rolling to pass a diplomacy check, just actually just talking. Which is I liked a lot.
Yeah, I guess that kind of segues-ish into the hook, which is Blaine, the inheritor of the Mistmoor fortune, I guess just stumbles into the inn town when you're there, and he petitions kind of the group that he needs help reclaiming.
It is. You're misremembering the miss. It starts. The PCs stumble upon a conversation, right? So the PCs come into town. Yes. Right. And they encounter, so they're going to actually, that's one of the things I kind of really enjoyed about the preamble to this is that the whole, raison d'etre for the PCs to be in town is they've come into the area because they heard there was a black dragon who had a bunch of treasure. So for the past X number of weeks, the PCs have been slogging around in the swamp looking for a black dragon, and Black Dragon ain't there.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So I really enjoyed that concept because it illustrates the fact that not all rumors are true, right? And whenever there's a rumor table, there's always ones on there that are say false.
Yeah.
But I think it's kind of fun. You don't actually have to play this out at the table if you don't want to, but as your preamble to starting the session, you can sort of point out that adventuring isn't all glamorous and it doesn't always work out. So, you're coming into town tired and dirty and smelly because you've been looking for treasure, monsters to slay, and there hasn't been that. So, PCs slog into town, and what they encounter is Blaine, who we'll meet shortly, chasing after a messenger, and there's a bit of a interaction between them, whatever the guy's name is. Steve, you can't do this to me. And he's just like, hey man, I'm just the messenger. Take it up with the Duke, but I don't have the money. Take it up with the Duke, right? I can't do anything for you. Take it up with the Duke.
Yeah.
And that's the sort of the scene they stumble upon. And then Blaine, the nobleman goes back into the inn, and then the PCs go in, get cleaned up, et cetera, and they can either follow up the lead, they can go find out what's happening, or Blaine will approach them because he's desperate.
That's right, yeah.
So this leads us into the hook, which is basically Blaine, this nobleman, will try to recruit the PCs to help him
find the vault of Mistmoor.
Find the vault, because what's happened is that his family owes the Duke a ton of back taxes or whatever. And Blaine has recently come into his inheritance. I can't remember what he is, a Viscount.
Viscount.
Or whatever, yeah. So now that he's inherited the stuff from his father, presumably, the Duke has called in the debts. Which is one thing I did enjoy is the reason why he's called in the debts now is because he caught Blaine philandering with his daughter and has held a grudge against him for years, and he finally has the opportunity for payback. Which explains why the debts weren't called in a generation ago or what have you. So I did like that it just starts in the middle of things, right? Like the PCs stumble upon a conversation, right? Like it's they don't have to go looking for it. It's it's dropped in their laps if they will. And the only sort of caveat is your PCs can totally just ignore this. Like again, it's more side questy than main adventure hook, if you will, because they can just be like, no man, we just been in the swamp for a week. We don't want to, and that's the end of it. Like there's no real consequences. I mean,
although like if you look at it that way, that they were just slogging around in the swamps for X weeks and they came out with nothing, and then you've got Blaine, who I think he up front offers him 2,000 gold in the beginning, so that's like could be pretty eye catching. You're just like, ugh, we've just been in the swamps, our feet are grungy, they're gross, and this guy's got $2,000 hanging in front of us. All we got to do is find a vault.
Yeah. But the thing is, though, it's a promise of 2,000 for the party, right? So it's party of 4 or $500 each or whatever. Only if they find it. So there's no cash up front, and there's no cash if they don't succeed, because Blaine don't got 2,000 gold, right? He needs
the vault.
He just suspects that there's at least that much money in his family's vault in Mistmoor Manor. So it really depends on if your PCs are trusting and willing to take a gamble, because right, it's a legitimate chance that nothing comes of this whatsoever. But yeah, it's a reasonable chunk of change, and again, it ties into like presumably everyone's around the table because
they want to play D&D.
They want to play D&D. So
I mean, we often say like PCs won't take hooks, but like that's the point of the game, is to take the hooks, and I think we make that counterpoint a lot, that like, well, they might just miss it, but I mean, we're here to play the game, so you'd assume that everything that you kind of drop in front of them, they're going to take.
You hope.
You
hope, but maybe they really.
I think we just sound very pessimistic sometimes at the start of adventures because we've read so many that's like, they just might never do this.
Well, it's and that's fine, right? I mean, the point is to provide your players with opportunities for adventure without forcing them to do it.
Yes.
Right? I think it's not unreasonable to have multiple threads and multiple hooks available that provide different possibilities to your players. So I think it's completely reasonable for your players to just be like,
yeah, we don't want to.
No, we don't really need the money, and we'd much rather go back out in the swamp and find a dragon, right? Like I think that's not unreasonable if they're doing a hex crawl and this is just what happens in this particular
and
hex.
If they say that, you hand out your pre-printed character sheets and you're like, you're now the group that's interested in that.
That would be such the biggest.
Yeah.
You go to sleep. No, let's do the dream sequence where this all happens. So it's pretty reasonable. Blaine, what I want to say is Blaine will tag along as an NPC. He isn't there to participate in combat literally at all.
No. Yeah.
But he is there as sort of a exposition machine, right? Like he can fill in backstories and help fill in the gaps and potentially help to deal with Psyche and Brock if things go wonky with those pair of thieves. So I kind of broke up the other part into like the haunting encounters and the manor encounters.
I sort of did the same. I
don't know if you want to bounce between the two or just sort of.
Well, I only made note of a couple of the hauntings. I mean, the hauntings are about a page and a half, 2 pages of events that happen as you're exploring the house. And I think one of the things that I actually enjoyed about this adventure in general is that you're meant to explore and kind of interact with the hauntings and different things that go on because they provide the information in gaining access to the vault.
Yes.
So if you're not interested in kind of the paranormal side of the adventure, you could just miss getting the keys to it.
Well, what I really liked about the adventure is it's sort of a bait and switch to a certain extent, because there's two thieves that have taken up residence in the manor and are pretending that it's haunted.
That's right, yeah.
So they're creating situations to mimic ghosts, and what you can find out in game is that Blaine had previously already been to the manor with some of his friends and encountered the quote-unquote ghost, and one of his friends disappeared.
Yeah.
They don't actually say when this happened, but presumably it wasn't that long ago for reasons that we'll see, because you rescue his friend and he's not super choked about the whole situation. And
yeah.
I assume if I've been held prisoner for like
he was fed.
Months.
He understands.
Yeah,
you know?
no, I'll come back to that because I was super not on board with that response. So you have the fake ghosts. You have the Scooby-Doo aspect where but through their meddling, if you will, through their snooping, they've actually woken up the real ghosts. So there's fake ghosts and real ghosts, and that kind of creates an interesting interplay because.
I will say about these NPCs is that so the psyche, however you want to say it, the female part of them. So they were previous adventurers that didn't like the bloodshed of adventuring, so decided to become thieves to not hurt people and still make their fortune. But she has the slippers of the Zephyr, as they're described as, which she floats 4 inches off the ground so she doesn't leave footprints. And I mean, you come into contact with this woman a lot. So I think it would be probably reasonable that your party would want to steal her shoes because they notice that she's floating, and that's extraordinarily strong. But I like the flavor of Brock that he was wounded in the throat, fatally wounded in the throat, so he can't speak anymore, and that the wound was so fatal that his priest who was with him adventuring could only just stymie the bleeding but not actually regenerate his vocal cords. And I thought that's just neat flavor. I was always a fan of playing D&D as a kid, and when you went unconscious or died you got a scar or something of the sort. So I really like that.
Yeah, it's not really included enough. I know there's certain optional rules in some of the systems, and people have homebrewed a ton of this type of wound and injury type of things where you can lose hands and whatnot. It's tough because if you lose your hand, you Jamie Lannister it up, you effectively
can't. You have to have some penalty to attacking with the other hand, right?
You can't. Yeah, exactly. You lose some of your effectiveness. If you're a wizard, you can't cast spells effectively anymore. So there's that type of penalty to it, even though there are spells that can regenerate.
I don't think I would ever take it to the extreme of maybe losing a thing that makes you what you are, but I like the cosmetic,
lose an eye and have
part of your ear is gone, or you got to wear an eye patch now, or
But I also like the idea, though, is that you could suffer injuries in combat that would force you to retire, right? Because once again, the idea that there are consequences to this. I also like the idea that I've seen floated around that there should be psychological effects to dying.
Yeah.
Right. That you die and get brought back, but you have permanent consequences to that. And it's usually, PTSD related stuff or what have you. But I like the idea that you can accrue that type of damage.
Thematically plays nice in my head that if you were a healer in some kind of combat, that you would probably just be doing the minimum to stop somebody from dying. Yeah. So you could get to the next person, right? And that makes sense that you wouldn't sit there and fully be able to heal someone. Maybe that wound in the leg to stop the femoral artery from bleeding is just enough, but they walk with a limp now.
Yeah.
I think that stuff is kind of neat to play narratively, but we're getting off track.
It's interesting. And then again, it's only a lower level problem because the higher level spells can regenerate missing limbs and whatnot. So I don't know. This gets into the situations why aren't good priests going around and just regenerating people's missing limbs?
I don't know. It's against the It's not in it's a list of things you can't do in the healing guide.
Unless you're
healing.
paid a ton of money. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. When you work out like the math of it, like even the good clerics aren't particularly good. They're just greedy. It's a business.
So you want to just talk about some of the hauntings and then
Yeah, well,
move on to the manor, or how do you want to?
Well, I got the hauntings first, so you
Okay.
can just go through. So basically, there are scripted ghost encounters that occur starting in the evening and then going through the night. So if the PCs arrive during midday or whatnot, none of this should occur. And this all kind of assumes that the PCs actually spend the night in the manor while they're looking for stuff, which, again, no guarantee. Like, and this isn't one of those situations where, like, oh, well, you know, maybe they won't follow the lead. It's just like, well, maybe they just won't camp there.
Yeah.
Like, that's a potential issue, but, you know, you can just sort of hand wave travel time and make it so they're there in the evening.
Yeah.
So from a time frame standpoint, these probably will start after the encounters with Psyche earlier, right? So it's sort of we're getting ahead of ourselves, but they're all kind of lumped around. But basically, there are 3 ghosts of the 3 sisters who the PCs will interact with over the course of the evening and the night. I think there's 6 encounters, 3 in the evening and 3 in the night. And I liked it a lot. I liked how they were scripted. I liked the fact that the sisters, because they're identical triplets, you don't know inherently which ghost you're encountering just by looking at them.
Yep.
And this information, once again, like Blaine can totally fill it in, like
Yep.
that they're triplets, they're identical, and all that type of stuff. They're his family, effectively. So I also like the fact that later ghost encounters can be affected by what the PCs have done in earlier ghost encounters or in the actual manor itself.
Actions they've taken.
Yeah, exactly. Particularly with the bookish ghost. I can't remember.
Reverie.
Yeah, that one. They can do they can save her books, and they can do a few other things that we'll talk about in a minute here that predispose her to wanting to help.
Yeah.
Right. I also like that only one of them is really kind of totally in the moment and appreciates the fact that they're dead, and one of them sort of just imagines she's alive, and one of them's just crazy. So there's a big difference in behavior between them. You got anything you want to add? I got some things specifically to mention, but I'll give you a chance to.
No, the hauntings, I agree with everything that you said. The only one that really made me go like, was the animated dragon in the basement that they had kept.
Oh, yeah.
I thought that was kind of interesting. They had how do they describe a zombie dragon?
It's a stuffed. The funny thing, what I really appreciated is that it's a black dragon. So the PCs find the dragon they've been looking for. It's just been dead for like 200 years or whatever. And then there's the ghost encounter where the zombie, the stuffed dragon has been animated previously.
And the last command was just to hang out.
Pretend to be a
Sleeping
stuffed
dragon.
animal. But yeah, there's the ghost encounter where it does animate and it will attack, and then you got to fight a giant stuffed dragon, which is kind of hilarious. I did enjoy that as well. In terms of the haunting, the ghosts are dangerous. Right, that's one thing. We'll touch on it, I'm sure, again, like if you're bad at the end, you actually get the ghost angry at you. But appreciate the fact that in this edition of D&D, ghosts caused aging damage. So they didn't cause damage. They caused you to age by decades at a time. So if you're human, you get hit by a ghost like 3 times, you're dead. Because you're now 150 years old and you just die from a heart attack, right? So all 3 of these ghosts innately have these abilities. They're just non-hostile from the get-go. If the PCs are hostile to them, they will become hostile against the PCs. So not engaging with them socially, in a conversational matter, can very quickly end up bad.
Very bad.
Like super bad, right? What else did I want to mention regarding these? I liked that they can be aided, in particular from the poet girl. And I like I can't remember what her name is, the flirty one.
Rebecca?
Rebecca, yes. That she mistakes one of the PCs as her fiance, and then like wants to dance with them, and then tells them to meet her up in the hayloft later on. And in the hayloft encounter, what I liked about it is that the PCs haven't been there previously. There's spiders, like giant spiders up there. And if they haven't killed the spiders and the ghost shows up and the spiders attack the PCs, the ghost goes like hardcore ghosty and just murders all the spiders. So if your PCs haven't by that point appreciated how dangerous these ghosts could be, they just witnessed like this, this one ghost just kill 3 spiders like nobody's business, right? Because it's just this. Spiders can't hurt her. She just walks over and like touches them, and they all shrivel up and die. And what was the thing? There was the encounter. Continuing on with the encounter in the hayloft, is that the ghost becomes frustrated that she can't physically interact with the person she's misunderstood. So if there is a female PC, she will try to possess them and then like make out with the other PC.
It's pretty funny.
Funny, air quotes. But what I liked about it from a writing standpoint is if the non-possessed PC is just like, all right, then Blaine's like, wait, come on. Like, this is not okay. Like, there's the built-in moral compass to be like, this is super not okay, people.
Guys.
And I mean, it's just it's a throwaway scene, but I thought that it was very well thought out to have the DM lever in there to just be like, this is bad. This is not okay. And then, the ghost becomes frustrated and confused, and then eventually sort of realizes what, that person's not Tommy, and then can provide information.
Yeah.
Right. And the key point with interacting with the ghosts is that they can provide information that can lead the PCs to being able to discover the location of the vault. And that's sort of the main hurdle in this adventure, is that none of the ghosts know where the vault is, right? They know of the vault, but they don't know where it is. They know their dad knew of it, and they can point you in the direction of their dad's skull, so you can talk to his spirit. But that's about it. The other thing I liked about in terms of the scripted encounters is the reason why the PCs can't sleep in the manor. So the evil guy that's basically drove the one girl insane by pretending to be a talking bird, and then, tricked her into killing everybody.
Not tricked her, drugged her, and then made her go through withdrawals, and then would drug her again.
Well,
that's
basically
how he made
gave
her go insane.
Hallucinogens.
Yeah.
And bad guy. But after everyone was dead, he basically he was trying to rob the guy, like basically talked to the ghost of the dead guy, and then basically got tricked by the dead ghost and trapped in the vault, and he died, and he turned into a greater shadow, effectively, who has limited ability to affect what's happening in the house. And when the PCs are sleeping, he's able to cause nightmares, and basically the PCs can't get a good night's sleep.
Correct.
What I loved about that situation is the way they presented in the adventure, that the first time this occurs, you should run the dream like it's actually happening.
Yeah.
So, people, you set up camp, go to sleep, and then just keep playing. You're woken up by a noise in the middle of the night. Okay, what do you guys do? Okay, we go check it out. And then you just keep ramping up the crazy. There is the
walls start bleeding.
The walls start bleeding.
A troll breaks through the wall. All just sorts of ridiculousness that you would never have the opportunity to ever do, and to kill your party.
Just ramp it up, and then give them impossible situations and then people should just start dying. Right? Red dragon's head bursts through the wall and eats Steve. Mm-hmm. Right? Steve takes 70 points of damage. Steve's dead, right? You just ramp it up until the last person dies, and then you have them wake up screaming because it was all a dream. And it only works once, right? Because obviously you can't just keep doing this; it could become tedious. But I really like the idea of
Nightmare dream sequence.
So the PCs play through. I mean, they might start to be like, "Wait, come on, like, what? A second dragon? You know, like
another dragon head burst through the wall."
Yeah. You know,
but I agree. Yeah, it was just such a cool, like, fun thing that you could run and just like murder your PCs and just do like any kind of ridiculous. And then the knives come alive and fly across the room. And you know, I could see it being fun for everybody. Yeah.
You know, Bob triggers a trap and sprays acid in his face. His skin is melting. Like you could really play it up hugely, consequence free, right? Like you just make it super crazy and have a lot of fun with it. So I did enjoy that. But the main point is that because of that effect, they just constantly have nightmares when they're sleeping. They can't get sleep.
Yeah.
And as I said earlier, that this should affect recovery. Right, if you haven't got a good night's sleep, you can't gain spells back.
Yeah.
The only thing where I'm not 100% sure on this is like, how does this affect elves? Because elves meditate, they don't sleep. So if you're all elves, it might not be an issue.
I think like the general purpose of it is that like you're supposed to do this in an evening, so they just don't want you sleeping in rooms. So I don't know. You could just say like you could disturb their thoughts. You could do another type of thing that you're unable to drown out the sounds of the haunting of the ghost, right?
Yeah,
like, think of something that would interrupt meditation that just makes them want to keep moving.
It is. It's designed to keep them up so they encounter the ghost. But you got to kind of like hand wave time a little bit in here because you can't really play it out in real time because, you know, say you're there for 18 hours or whatnot. It doesn't take 18 hours to check the house. You know what I mean? So you got to play a little loose with time. Or maybe you still let them sleep and the nightmares don't affect recovery, but they just keep getting woken up by the nightmares. And that would provide them the opportunity to encounter the ghostly encounters. And then, you know, some of them, the timing is known, right? Like, you know that you're supposed to be in the loft at midnight or something like that, right?
Yeah.
So it's not nearly that crazy. So this is sort of ongoing while they're doing the exploration of the house. So now let's talk about the house.
The house. So, I mean, aside from the ghost encounters, most of the things that you run into are like the shenanigans of Brock and Psyche. I think that their tactics are kind of fun and cool, especially the privy and their portable hole that they have. It's like
the portable hole trap. I will say that depends on your party.
Yeah.
Because it's a save or die, quote unquote, right? Like if you fail to notice the trap and, you know, give them a dexterity save or reflex save or what have you, and they fail that, they're gone.
Well, they're gone, but not dead.
No, they're not dead. Like it's not punishing in that sense, but it's as written, they don't even get saves, right? So as written, they're being super. I guess we should describe the trap.
So the trap is that there's a toilet, and they've covered
a former toilet.
Yeah,
you can't
so
tell it's a toilet. The hole's still there.
They've covered the top with, I don't know, moss and whatever kind of things to make it
canvas,
canvas,
and then dust, I think, or something.
And I don't know, a foot or whatever. Below that is a portable hole that they've made slits in the foundation under the floorboards, so that when you walk over the pit trap, you fall through the pit into the portable hole, where Brock is waiting to, you know, take the table sheet off the dinner table real quick and run you away to his prison, where he releases you and you're in the prison for a while.
Yeah. So inside the portable hole, it's mostly full with water. So you fall into water, making a splashing sound in the portable hole. And then he pulls the portable hole out. So anybody coming to look in the hole will just see
like a 50-foot.
You see the drop into the privy. Yeah. It'll be this scummy sewer water effectively underneath it, but you'll never surface. So as far as your rest of your party is aware, you've just fallen into the sewer and never come back up.
Yeah.
So they're going to presumably go rummage around down there to find nothing, which is kind of funny, quote unquote. And then, as you said, Brock takes the portable hole, runs to the basement, basically where the prison is, and then dumps out the contents. So you come out in a big sploosh of water. The captured person. Then he takes the pole back and then basically runs off with it.
Yeah.
So it's a situation where the PC gets trapped without anything to do effectively until they're rescued by the rest of the party. So for the PC that gets captured, it may not be fun, and there's going to be a lot of conversation in the hallway, or notes passed to the person that's dead or disappeared, quote unquote, to make things make sense. So that might be a little difficult, or boring. When you split the party and you're running at a table, there's issues because they're sitting around, if you're dealing with, conversation encounters between Psyche and the captured PC, well, everyone else is sitting around and vice versa.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
That's the only real issue I had with it. It's a super clever trap. But I guess the important thing to mention about these two thieves is they're both chaotic good. So they are not actually trying to hurt anybody or kill anybody. And it specifically says that if Psyche hears Blaine talking about his debt and how he's going to be ruined and yada, 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 she flat out they'll make themselves known and they'll help because they intend to rob the tax collectors.
Yeah.
So they want him to pay the taxes, and they're just going to rob the tax collectors, which I liked. It's a very there's a good character development standpoint. It makes sense. What else did I want to? Well, while we're on the topic of talking about of Brock and Psyche, I liked that the fake blood she splashes around is actually berry juice. So if anybody's gross enough to taste it, they're like, oh, yum.
Berries. Yeah.
It's fruity, right? It's
they're clever, but they're not clever enough that your party couldn't figure it out eventually. If they were curious enough and actually it doesn't quite make sense, which I like too. They could find the little, I think there are trapdoors hidden behind a bunch of vines on the deck kind of thing. They can figure it out, and it's just but it's not that easy to do. So I appreciate that about this adventure.
Yeah, and I also think that once the actual ghosty stuff starts happening, Psyche and Brock should not be still pretending to be ghosts, right?
And I think the jig's sort of up when you Joshua, when you find him in the dungeon level. I think at that point you're just supposed to be okay, and pull the sheet away from the whatever. Yeah, right.
And Joshua is Blaine's buddy, friend who disappeared when they originally investigated this. And this is where I have the problem with, you rescue Blaine, he's like, no, but you rescue Joshua, he's like, oh, don't worry about it. No,
Psyche and Brock love those guys.
Oh yeah. They're good people.
Yeah, they just want some loots,
Yeah, they treated me real nice. I've only been locked up which is why it has to have been a really short period of time, because I don't care how nice you were treated, if you've been locked up for 2 weeks, you're gonna be angry about it.
Yeah,
I don't care how often they let you use the privy, right?
Yeah, that's true.
You've been, either it's the worst case of Stockholm syndrome ever, or it's a little unreasonable, I would say. So it's one of the things that bugged me a little bit, is there's not that time frame in there to put things into context. Speaking of time frames, though, is they do say that the murders happened 200 years ago. And I'm like, man, the manor's in really good shape for being neglected for 200 years.
Yeah.
And none of the books are ruined or anything. So I'd be more inclined to maybe shorten that time frame a little bit. But that's just, once again, your players aren't going to care. No one's going to be like, oh, I don't know if there wouldn't be more mildew damage over 200 years of neglect, right?
Books are still readable. Yeah.
Yeah. It'd all just be rotten to pieces. It's just, that's how my brain works. That I'm like, oh, without strong maintenance, there's no way you can abandon a wooden structure for 200 years and blah, 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 blah. I guess I also want to mention there are a couple of just random monstery encounters. There's some, I think there's some millipedes, there's the spiders in a couple of places that are there just sort of to keep your players from not being bored,
Yeah.
I guess, effectively. The one encounter in particular that jumped out at me was the skeletons in the bathing pool, like the drowning tub, if you will.
Well, it is a drowning tub, yeah.
So there's a big stone waiting bathing pool, if you will. It's all full of scummy water and full of all the bones of the servants that were killed, once again, 200 years ago. But they reach out and grab anybody that comes close and then just tries to basically grapple and drown them.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of them in there. Like a skeleton, maybe not scary, but there's 15 skeletons. And while drowning rules tend to be a little lenient for any edition of D&D effectively, it still is thematically interesting of an encounter. Like even if they just, your cleric just turns undead and puffs, dusts them all or whatever. Just the idea of a bunch of skeletons that are trying to drown people in mucky water was the right type of horror-y vibe.
And there's another one, I think, it's the mother. You find the mother's skeleton in the closet. Like there's still remnants of the horror that happened, the ant. Yeah. So it's there's still remnants of the horror that happened there.
Well, that's the thing is they've never been addressed, right? You find two of the girls' bodies. You find the ant's body. So that's one of the things that you can do to sort of get the ghosts on your side.
You can put some of the bones to rest.
You can put them in the crypt. You can basically bury, because there's a family crypt. I mean, it's not like you have to dig holes. You just take the bones and you put them in the crypt would be sufficient as far as I'm concerned for sort of dealing with that type of stuff. So that's one of the ways you can make them happy. What else is the other thing?
You can kill the bookworm in the library to save her poems. One of them was a writer, so you can do that.
Yeah, she's a poet. Which I actually really liked is that there's the book of poetry that she's still been writing. So you can see that there's fresh writing in the book. And then I can't remember what the poem is. It doesn't really matter. But you can see that the writing is the same handwriting as all of the other writing that goes back hundreds of years effectively. But the bookworm, it's a weird monster that eats books. So you save her books by killing this worm, and she likes you because she likes her books. So you do those things and you get the ghosts on your side, and that's how you find out about the
potions of arcane comprehension.
Yeah, there's a couple of
we're talking about the ghosts and the manor separately, but they interact quite a lot together. And if you don't interact with the ghosts, you can't figure out the information that you need to gain access to the vault, because they will tell you, I think, about the laboratory and that you can find there. Because you find a scroll.
There's a couple of caches they can tell you about. So there's one cache in the church, the temple, what do they call it? The chapel. Right? They have their own little family chapel. So there's a cache of magic scrolls. There might be some potions in there too.
All written at 21st level or something. Like something absurd that you wouldn't be able to comprehend.
Well, and the reason why it has to be at such a high level, because one of them is Speak with Dead, and to be able to talk to the father who's been dead for 200 years, you need to have a high level casting of Speak with Dead, at least for this edition.
Right.
So to be able, I think there's potions that in the lore were developed by their aunt, who was a wizardess, mage or what have you. But I think they only matter to allow people who can't use scrolls to read scrolls. So if you don't have any magic users in your party that can use the scrolls, they've put in this lever to allow any party to have success.
And I think there was if a magic user does use it, I think it grants them the ability to be able to scribe spells without failure for a certain period of time. So that's sort of you need to interact with the ghost to find out all these clues, because you need to know that you have to drink the potion to cast the spell, to talk to the skull, to get the passwords to enter the vault.
The thing is, okay, and this is the point is, let's talk about the vault. So the vault is cruel to begin with. So in the study, behind a giant painting, is a mirror. And this mirror, if the proper command word is spoken, becomes a portal that takes the people to a mini demi-plane that is the vault. So the problem is the vault is the portal is only open for a very short period of time.
Yep, like a turn, 6 seconds or something.
Yeah,
like
and
that.
there's a different password to open it on either side.
Yep.
So it's one password to get in and one password to get out. I think it's like
Medusa and Perseus.
Yeah, which it seems like it's the wrong pantheon to be using, but obviously whatever you want, it doesn't really matter. And this is where things are problematic. So first and foremost, the mirror is a mirror of opposition. Now, if you didn't bother to look up what a mirror of opposition is when you read it, if you look in a mirror of opposition without speaking the command word, it makes a nega version of you. So you get your evil doppelganger, appears, steps out, and tries to murder you. So if people, like players, find the mirror before they know anything about it, or you're just searching the house, you look behind stuff, which isn't unreasonable because they're going to totally use their real life meta knowledge that, safes are often behind paintings. So they're just going to move it. They could find the mirror. It can make, Nega Fighter that just comes out and like jibs your wizard, like very reasonably, right? Like it doesn't actually take that much. A PC's power level is generally a lot higher than a random NPC that you're going to find. So that, first of all, struck me as potentially awful. The other issue is that even when talking to the Viscount, who will tell them where the vault is, will tell them what the password is to get into the vault, but the ghost will not mention anything about it having a different password to get out, unless the player specifically asks that question.
True.
And this is what tripped up the evil bad guy, whatever his name was.
Erebus.
Erebus, yes, which just means shadowy, right? Dumb names. But that's what tripped him up. Like, he got into the vault, but he couldn't get back out because of that reason. So the situation could be mirrored in that, pun, but could be copied by the players getting the password to getting in, and then getting trapped inside there.
Which is bad because once inside Erebus, and he goes, laughs at you a bit, and then a lot of undead animate, 16 skeletons, 6 shadows, plus Erebus.
Because apparently, over the last 200 years, other people have gotten in but not gotten out, and he's just been accumulating them as his little undead horde on this side of the vault. So it is a serious fight. Again, I suck at judging difficulties of
I imagine
combat.
6 shadows would be difficult to deal with.
Ability damage is difficult. Energy drain is difficult. They're incorporeal, which is also potentially problematic.
And I mean, I guess like you could have 5 level 6 PCs here. You could, it depends, right? Like it says this is for a third to 6. So maybe if you're 3 level 3 PCs, or if you're 5 level 6s, it's going to just depend.
If it's 3 level 3s, you just all died. Without question. So it's a serious fight.
Could be a losing point. You could lose here.
I will say though that like the PC should be at full power, right? Like there's no reason why they can't prepare for anything. And that's not to say there's nothing that necessarily telegraphs that they need to be prepared for anything. But once they know the location and the password to get in, there's no time frame.
Yeah.
You can come back 3 days later, right? Yeah. Also, they can dump all of their cooldowns, if you will, right? This is the only fight that should be happening that day. So they could dump everything into it. Yeah. And theoretically, if you really wanted to, you could probably let them use Psyche and Brock as helper NPCs. Though they'd probably try to steal as much as possible.
Well, they've got a portable hole, and they do describe later that they will use the portable hole to stow away as much treasure as they can. What was I going to say? I forgot. One of the cool things that I liked about this adventure it talks about the mirror a little bit and how it was like gifted to them by some deity, I think.
It's a super high level cleric, the same person who made the scrolls. Yeah,
so it's like, but it's a demi-plane on its own, sort of, and that if the house burned down, the mirror would just stay there floating in space and time until something was built around it. Thought that was kind of neat.
That is super cool.
So if you survive or die, and assuming that you won and got the vault open for our friend Blaine, Well, actually, if you don't survive and Blaine doesn't get the treasure, he tries to flee.
Yeah.
So that's the narrative that happens there.
If you get trapped inside, there's lots of people who can get you out. I mean,
Yeah.
and that's the default is you're not necessarily supposed to be able to figure out what the password is to get back out, but because
the ghosts will let you out.
the
or
ghosts will let
Psyche
you out.
will.
Basically,
Yeah.
well, that's actually one thing we didn't mention is that through talking to the ghosts, you can find out that they are stuck here because Erebus killed them, and his evil basically ties them to it. So it's another reason to kill this evil shade is to free the spirits of these poor girls. But the two of them at least, the non-crazy ones, will stay to make sure you get back out to say thank you. So that's sort of the levers to let you out is that, or Psyche or Brock will have been spying on you the entire time. And if you don't show back out, they'll open it up to check out to see what happened. And, and then you can sneak out that way.
So if you befriended the ghosts along the way and helped them at the end of the story, they'll come and just say, hey, thanks. Bye. Yeah. You put us to rest. Now, it does mention if you are specifically not good PCs and you kill Blaine, that the ghosts will turn on you and slaughter your party.
And we should point out why the PCs might be tempted to kill Blaine.
Because there's like $100 bajillion worth of stuff in the vault. Like, it is loaded.
The vault's got, I don't know, 50,000, 100,000 gold pieces worth of treasure. Like, the Mistmoors are loaded.
Yeah.
It's got a ton of cash in there. So if they get greedy, and the funny thing too is like Blaine gets more generous, right? Instead of paying them $2,000, he pays them $5,000 and lets them keep the big pile of magical items that aren't actually his. They're just sort of the leftovers of all the previous adventurers who died inside the
and I like that there was like plan B. Like if you're like, if you're too nice to actually just kill your party with the ghosts, you can let them take the money, but like Psyche and Brock will come and rob you at every chance that they can get. And if you get too far out, the town will hire people to come after you. Like, you're not getting away with the money, effectively. Like, you'll just be robbed and robbed or arrested.
And they say that if you, because Blaine is sort of the last living relative of the ghosts, if you kill him, they sick on you. And this is once again like the terrifying nature of these ghosts. They cause you to age 1d4 times 10 years per hit.
Yep.
So they'll just kill you.
Yep.
Like, you can't fight them. There's two of them.
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to have a bad time.
And so if you are the good guys, Blaine pays you and he offers to be your patron. He gives you gold and items, and he says, I want to be your patron. You can adventure on behalf of the Mistmoors, and we can help rebuild our name. And if there's a female in the party, he realizes that he has no heirs, and will try to like cuddle up to a girl in the party and be like, hey, I should have some kids so we can have baby Mistmoors.
I did like that it provides a beautiful seed for the next however much of the adventure you want, right? Like, you could all become vassals of this Viscount and help to rebuild it and help drain the swamp and go out there and do missions and get lands or whatnot. It also provides an opportunity, if there's any female players or characters, that's the retirement plan, right? They don't have to immediately retire at that point, but they could date Blaine while they're adventuring, and once they retire, well, they can just come and be the Viscountess and marry into nobility, and that's the retirement plan. And I think that was neat. One thing I did note is that Erebus is supposed to have a cloak that lets him turn into a raven.
Yeah, where'd that go?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I made a note, like, if you ran this, you have to have a shape-shifting cloaky thing. Like, you have to give them the ability.
What a cool item that would be.
Yeah. Well, because you know how abusable...
Oh, for sure.
...shape change at will with an item would be, which is the only reason why I can think that they didn't include it, is that... But that's the one thing
we've talked about this a little bit before. It's like, we don't offer people cool magical items. Like, and there's so many of them. And what are the odds that you get something like that just because it's too good? Like, is that a good enough reason not to give someone something?
Yeah. No, I think you should be able to... I think balance is not something that should really be taken into account when you think about magic items.
Yeah.
Right? I think it's okay for low-powered PCs to find something stupidly powerful. Whether they can hang on to it for their entire career is unlikely, because more powerful people are going to be like, that's an awesome sword, yoink, right? Like,
I don't think there's anywhere that you might actually find out that Erebus was the Raven. Like, I don't know if, I think it only mentions that someone was suspicious of the Raven and the looks that it had, like its eyes were odd.
Yeah.
So you could find just a raven feathered cloak.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it could just be a cloak. Your PCs may hang on to it forever, not knowing what it is.
Detect magic. They'll figure it out. Actually, no. They just have to hang out with it, and they'll tune to it, and they'll
You're a bird!
You'll magically know that it's a bird thing. I guess the only last thing I wanted to sort of mention before we wrap things up is that I guess to go back to Blaine being thankful, I like that as a patron, you could easily turn this into a hex crawl thing. And this adventure, as I mentioned earlier, fits beautifully in a hex crawl campaign, because you're, hex crawling, looking for a dragon. You don't find it. You land in the town hex. This triggers, and Blaine's now your patron. Well, you're going to hex crawl around and help them deal with local issues, which I thought was like, oh yeah, it's nice. Like, a lot of adventures don't necessarily, in my mind at least, fit nicely into that sort of just episodic move around, explore the area.
Yeah, you know what? Like, why can't you plop the manor in Orlane? And then you can call to the reptile god it, Like, there's so many, you can put this manor anywhere.
Yeah.
You want it in any town and just be this big hub of adventure. And
then to wrap up again, I have a note here that I didn't want to forget about the opportunities, like becoming a knight of the Viscount, becoming his bride.
Yeah.
What I liked about that is that it's kind of a nice low-end reward, right? Like, it provides an opportunity for the PCs to retire just from adventuring in a reasonable manner, right? You do some more hex crawling, you retire to a nice little estate, and yay, right?
You're that retired 3rd level NPC that you meet.
Or 5th level, or
whatever.
8th level, right? Like, it provides a nice retirement package for your PCs once they decide to retire. And that got me thinking about how that's not really in vogue anymore. That adventure paths, be they Pathfinder or the mega 5th edition, covers 10 to 15 level adventures, don't do that. That the stakes are always saving the world.
Yeah.
You start as nobodies, you end up becoming these epic heroes, and that's the only progression.
True.
Right? There's never short sort of stories, right? Like, you never just reach a point where you're just like, that was super cool. I think this is a good, reasonable point for my fighter to retire. Yeah, he's going to help garrison the town. I want to play something new, right? Like giving up on adventures before they're, met a couple of gods and defeated a demon prince.
Like, think about the genesis of most fighters, whatever. You're a farmer, and lots of people do that. And it's like, well, if you're a farmer, like, how far have you really traveled? Maybe to the next town. Maybe 20 miles away. Like, how big is your scope all of a sudden? And I always thought it was like a kind of a cool premise that, like, say we retired characters at level 5 or level 4, that the next party could live in the same world. They could run into old, you could run into old characters that you had, and it's just like this cool progression of time that it's like maybe 30 years down the road, but you run into the Duke of Mistmoor, who was your old wizard or something, and just like, that's kind of a cool throwback to a group of people.
Well, I think that's how it used to be. I think most people's campaigns
characters
used to be that. Like, you had an ongoing campaign world, and it was populated by retired retired PCs that are now NPCs for future adventures. And I don't think that happens enough, because as design, you're running these self-contained epic level progressions, right? That always end with something end of the world, save the day situation. And there's no real opportunities to just jump off. There's no opportunity where someone's just like, you know what? I got 10K gold. I don't need this anymore. I'm going to go just hang out and party until I die.
I think it's an interesting point to bring up that, like, I think it's cool to run an adventure that you could jump off at any point, because that also includes that you can jump in at any point. Then it makes sense to start characters at level 6. makes sense to start characters at level 4 because you might only run adventure at that level, and you can just send them off into your world and start a new one or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But that might be a whole new discussion.
Well, yeah, the idea of you're running basically standalone adventures with standalone characters in a campaign world that adds to the richness of the world, but less so to and being the hero's buddy to superhero.
Yeah,
which is sort of the standard progression. Anyways, yeah, we're I think that's enough. I don't want to travel down this road.
It's a great adventure. I think you'd have fun running it. I think it's written really well. It reads really well, and I think it would play very well.
It's excellent. I am very happy with it, and would recommend it to anybody.
As always, guys, thanks for listening. Next week, we are taking a look at Matt Colville's Strongholds and Followers book, where he's written the adventure The Siege of Castle Rend. As always, thank you for listening.
Bye.